The clamor of shattering glass pierced the quiet morning as Winifred Evans scrambled to clean the mess before Mrs. Henderson discovered it, her calloused hands already raw from hours of scrubbing the saloon floors. The year was 1885, and Apache Junction, Arizona was experiencing one of its hottest summers yet, making the indoor labor both a blessing and a curse. "I'm sorry, Miss Winifred," Tommy, her 7-year-old brother whispered, his eyes wide with fear as he stared at the broken tumbler. "I just wanted a drink of water." Winnie to her siblings forced a smile. "It's all right, Tommy, just stay back so you don't cut yourself." At 22, she'd been caring for her 4 younger siblings since their parents died of typhoid fever 2 winters ago. Their father had been a miner with dreams bigger than his luck, leaving them nothing but debts and a tiny shack on the edge of town. She gathered the glass shards carefully, placing them in her apron pocket. Mrs. Henderson counted every piece of glassware, and Winnie couldn't afford another deduction from her already meager wages. "Will she take money away again?" asked Emma, her 9-year-old sister who stood in the doorway clutching 5-year-old Lily's hand. Behind them, 12-year-old James peered over their shoulders, his face solemn beyond his years. "Don't you worry about that," Winnie said, though her stomach twisted with anxiety. $3 a week barely kept food in their mouths and a roof over their heads. Another reduction might mean going hungry again. "James, can you take everyone home? I need to finish here, and Mrs. Henderson doesn't like children in the saloon even when it's closed." James nodded, taking his responsibility seriously. "Come on," he told the others. "Let's go check the traps I set yesterday. Maybe we caught something for supper." Winnie watched them go, her chest aching with a familiar mixture of pride and despair. They were good children, all of them. They deserved better than this life of perpetual scarcity. She returned to her work, scrubbing viciously at a particularly stubborn stain on the wooden floor. The Henderson Saloon wasn't the most reputable establishment in Apache Junction, but it was the only place that had hired her when desperation drove her to seek employment. Her mother would have been horrified to see her daughter cleaning a saloon, but the dead didn't have to feed hungry children. "You missed a spot," came a deep voice from the doorway. Winnie startled, splashing dirty water onto her already soiled dress. She looked up to find a man silhouetted against the morning light, tall and broad-shouldered with a cowboy hat shadowing his features. "The saloon doesn't open until noon, sir," she said, hastily wiping her hands on her apron. The man stepped inside, and she could see him more clearly now. He wasn't from town. She would have remembered him. His clothes were dusty from the trail, but of good quality. A gun belt sat comfortably on his hips, and his boots were those of a man who spent most of his time in the saddle. "I'm not here for a drink," he said, removing his hat to reveal sandy blonde hair and a face weathered by sun and wind. Kind blue eyes met hers, and something inside her chest fluttered unexpectedly. "My name's Forrest Quinn. I've just purchased the old Dawson Ranch about 10 miles east of town." Winnie knew the place, everyone did. Once the most prosperous cattle operation in the territory, it had fallen into disrepair after old man Dawson died without an heir. For 3 years it had sat empty, the buildings deteriorating, the grazing lands unused. "Congratulations," she said, unsure why he was telling her this. "But Mrs. Henderson won't be in until later if you're looking to speak with her." The man Forrest Quinn smiled, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "Actually, I was hoping to speak with you, Miss Evans, Winifred Evans." She stood, suddenly conscious of her dirty dress and disheveled hair. "What can I do for you, Mr. Quinn?" "I need help at the ranch," he said directly. "The house is a mess, and I need someone to cook and keep things tidy while I work on getting the operation running again." Hope sparked in Winnie's chest, quickly followed by suspicion. Single women didn't go to work at remote ranches for single men without risking their reputations or worse. As if reading her thoughts, Forrest added, "I'm offering proper employment with fair wages. $5 a week plus room and board for you and your family." Winnie's breath caught. "How do you know about my family?" "Small town," he said with a shrug. "The storekeeper mentioned you when I was buying supplies yesterday, said you're raising 4 young ones on your own. And you're offering to hire all of us." The suspicion wouldn't leave her. Men didn't make such generous offers without expecting something in return. "I need a lot of help," Forrest explained. "The place has been neglected for years. Your brother's old enough to help with the horses and lighter ranch work, and even the little ones can gather eggs and help with simple chores." He paused, studying her face. "It's honest work, Miss Evans. Better than scrubbing saloon floors, I'd wager. Better pay, better conditions, and a chance for her siblings to live somewhere other than their dilapidated shack." It sounded too good to be true. "Why me?" she asked bluntly. "There must be other people in town looking for work." Forrest smiled again, that dimple appearing briefly. "Mrs. Crawford at the general store says you're the hardest working woman in Apache Junction, and that those kids of yours are well-mannered despite their circumstances. That's the kind of help I want." He placed his hat back on his head. "Think it over. I'll be staying at the hotel until tomorrow morning. If you decide yes, be ready with your family at 7. I've got a wagon for your belongings." With that, he tipped his hat and was gone, leaving Winnie staring after him, her mind spinning with possibilities and doubts. When Mrs. Henderson arrived later that morning, Winnie confessed to the broken glass, apologized profusely, and gave notice all in one breath. The older woman looked at her in surprise. "You found other work?" "Maybe," Winnie said cautiously. "Mr. Quinn, the man who bought the Dawson Ranch, has offered positions to me and my siblings." Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows shot up. "Forrest Quinn, interesting." She studied Winnie's face. "Be careful, girl. Men like that, men with money and looks, they don't usually hire plain girls like you without having certain expectations." Winnie flushed with embarrassment and anger. "He's offering decent wages for honest work." "I'm sure he is," Mrs. Henderson said, not unkindly. "Just keep your wits about you. And if it doesn't work out, your job here will be waiting." She paused. "Though I'll have to dock your pay for that glass." That evening, Winnie gathered her siblings around their rickety table and explained Mr. Quinn's offer. "A real ranch." Tommy's eyes grew wide. "With horses and cows and everything?" "Do we each get our own room?" Lily asked, bouncing in her seat. "I don't know about that," Winnie said, "but it would be a proper house, not this." She gestured around their tiny, drafty shack. James, ever the practical one, frowned. "What does he expect from you, Winnie?" She met her brother's worried gaze. For all his youth, James understood too well the dangers a single woman faced. "He says he needs a housekeeper and help with the ranch, nothing more." "And you believe him?" James asked, did she? Winnie wasn't sure. But the alternative was to stay here, scrubbing floors for barely enough to survive, watching her siblings grow thin and tired. At least at the ranch they'd have enough to eat. "I think we should take the chance," she said finally. If things aren't as he says, we can always come back." The decision made, they spent the evening packing their meager belongings. When everything was ready, Winnie took out the small wooden box where she kept their mother's few pieces of jewelry. She slipped on her mother's wedding ring, it might offer some protection against unwanted advances, and fastened the small gold locket around her neck. Inside was a tiny portrait of their parents on their wedding day, their faces young and hopeful. "Watch over us," she whispered to their smiling images. The next morning they stood with their bundles in front of the general store, waiting anxiously. Right at 7, a wagon rolled down the dusty main street, Forrest Quinn handling the reins of 2 sturdy horses. "Morning," he called cheerfully as he pulled to a stop. His gaze swept over the 5 of them and their pitiful collection of possessions. If he was disappointed by what he saw, he didn't show it. "Is this everything?" Winnie nodded, suddenly doubting her decision. Was she being foolish, trusting this stranger? Forrest jumped down from the wagon and approached them. He tipped his hat to Winnie before squatting down to the children's level. "You must be the Evans gang. I'm Forrest Quinn." "I'm James," her brother said with all the dignity his 12 years could muster. "These are Emma, Tommy, and Lily." Pleased to meet you all, Forrest said seriously, shaking each child's hand as if they were adults. I hear you're hard workers. We are, James assured him. Good, because I need a lot of help. Forrest stood and turned to Winnie. Ready, Miss Evans? Winnie nodded, praying she wasn't making a terrible mistake. Forrest helped them load their belongings into the wagon, then lifted the youngest children onto the seat. Winnie and James climbed up beside them, and within minutes, they were leaving Apache Junction behind, headed east into the rising sun. The journey took most of the morning. As they traveled, Forrest pointed out landmarks and told stories about the area's history. He was easy to talk to, and gradually Winnie felt some of her tension ease. Whatever his motives, he seemed genuinely kind, especially with the children, when they crested a small rise, the Dawson Ranch, now Quinn Ranch, Winnie supposed spread out before them. A large, two-story house stood in need of paint, but was otherwise sound. Nearby, a barn and several outbuildings formed a rough courtyard. Beyond stretched fenced pastures and, in the distance, grazing lands that extended to the mountains on the horizon. It's not much to look at yet, Forrest said, a note of pride in his voice, but it will be. It's the biggest house I've ever seen, Tommy breathed, and Forrest laughed. Let's hope you think it's just as grand once you've helped clean it. The inside of the house was better than Winnie had feared, but worse than she'd hoped. Dust lay thick on every surface, the wallpaper was peeling in places, and there was evidence of mice and other creatures having made themselves at home. But the structure was solid, the roof didn't leak, and there was a massive kitchen with a good stove and pump that brought water right into the house. Forrest showed them to their rooms upstairs, one for Winnie, one for the girls, and one for James and Tommy. Each was furnished simply but adequately, with real beds and chests of drawers. It's not the Palmer House Hotel, he said as they completed the tour, but it'll be comfortable once we get it cleaned up. I've been sleeping in the foreman's cabin out back until the house is habitable. The implicit respect in that statement that he hadn't presumed to sleep in the main house where she and her siblings would be further eased Winnie's concerns. I'll let you get settled, Forrest said. There's food in the pantry for today. Tomorrow we can work out a proper routine. Left alone, Winnie sank onto the edge of her bed, overwhelmed by the sudden change in their circumstances. Winnie, James stood in the doorway. Do you think this is real, that we can stay here? She looked at her brother's face, seeing the same cautious hope she felt. I think so, she said. But let's take it one day at a time. That afternoon, they began the massive task of cleaning. By sundown, they'd cleared enough of the dust and cobwebs to make the kitchen and their bedrooms habitable. Winnie cooked a simple meal of beans and bacon, and Forrest joined them in the kitchen, praising her cooking extravagantly, though it was nothing special. As the days passed, a routine emerged. Winnie cooked and cleaned, gradually bringing order to the sprawling house. James helped Forrest with the horses and was learning to ride. The younger children gathered eggs from the few chickens, fed the barn cats, and helped with simple tasks like shelling peas or churning butter. Every evening, Forrest joined them for dinner, sharing stories of his day and asking about theirs. He was unfailingly polite to Winnie, treating her with a respect she'd rarely experienced since her father's death. With the children, he was patient and kind, teaching them ranch skills and answering their endless questions. 2 weeks after their arrival, Winnie was in the kitchen preparing supper when Forrest entered, his shirt darkened with sweat from a day of mending fences. Something smells wonderful, he said, washing his hands at the pump. Just a stew, Winnie replied, though she'd taken extra care with it, adding herbs from the small garden she'd discovered behind the house. Well, it smells like heaven. He dried his hands on a towel. How are you settling in, Miss Evans? Well enough, she said, stirring the stew to avoid meeting his eyes. The children are happy here, and you? He asked. The directness of his question caught her off guard. She looked up to find him watching her intently, those blue eyes serious. I'm grateful for the opportunity, she said carefully. That's not what I asked. He took a step closer. Are you happy here, Winnie? It was the first time he'd used her given name, and something about the way he said it made her heart beat faster. Yes, I think I am. He smiled, and that dimple appeared briefly. Good. That's good. He seemed about to say more when the back door burst open and Tommy ran in, excitedly reporting that one of the barn cats had kittens. The moment broken, Forrest turned his attention to the boy's discovery, and Winnie returned to her cooking, trying to ignore the strange fluttering in her chest. That night, after the children were asleep, Winnie sat by the window in her room, looking out at the moonlit landscape. In just 2 weeks, this place had begun to feel like home in a way their shack in town never had. The children were thriving, their faces fuller, their spirits lighter. James was developing a confidence she'd never seen before, proudly showing off new skills Forrest taught him. Even little Lily was blossoming, following Emma around as they explored the ranch's wonders, and then there was Forrest himself. Winnie tried not to dwell on her growing attraction to him. He was her employer, nothing more. Yet she couldn't deny the way her pulse quickened when he entered a room, or how she found herself making extra efforts with her appearance each morning. It was foolish. Men like Forrest Quinn, educated, successful, handsome, didn't court women like her. She was plain, uneducated, with nothing to offer but hard work and the burden of 4 dependent siblings. Yet sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite interpret, a warmth in his eyes that made her wonder. "Don't be ridiculous," she scolded herself, turning away from the window. "Keep your mind on what matters." What mattered was that her siblings were safe and fed. What mattered was that they had a chance for a better life here. Her own foolish heart was irrelevant. As summer gave way to fall, the ranch transformed under their collective efforts. The house was now clean and welcoming, with curtains Winnie had sewn from fabric Forrest brought from town. The kitchen garden yielded vegetables for their table. A herd of cattle grazed in the distant pastures, tended by 2 cowhands Forrest had hired. One crisp October morning, Winnie was hanging laundry when she heard the sound of approaching horses. Looking up, she saw Forrest riding in, accompanied by a well-dressed man on an expensive-looking horse. "Winnie," Forrest called, dismounting smoothly. "This is Harold Blackwood, banker from Phoenix. He's come to discuss financing for additional cattle." The banker tipped his hat to her. "Madam, Mr. Blackwood," she acknowledged, suddenly conscious of her work dress and wind-blown hair. "I've invited Mr. Blackwood to stay for dinner," Forrest said. "Think you could manage something special?" "Of course," Winnie said, though inwardly she panicked. She had planned a simple meal of beans and cornbread for that evening, hardly suitable for impressing a banker. "Excellent," Forrest smiled. "We'll be in my office if you need anything." As the men walked toward the house, Winnie quickly finished hanging the laundry, then hurried to the kitchen to assess her options. There was a chicken she could roast, potatoes from the garden, the last of the summer tomatoes. She could make an apple pie with fruit from the small orchard behind the house. She worked furiously all afternoon, aware that this dinner could be important for Forrest's plans for the ranch. By 6 o'clock, the dining room table was set with the best dishes she'd found in the house, polished to a shine. The chicken was golden brown, the vegetables seasoned and steaming, and the pie cooling on the windowsill. The children, scrubbed clean and wearing their best clothes, sat at the table on their best behavior as Forrest led Mr. Blackwood into the dining room. "My word," the banker said, inhaling appreciatively. "Something smells delicious." "Miss Evans is a remarkable cook," Forrest said, pulling out a chair for his guest. "Among her many talents." The meal progressed pleasantly, with Forrest leading the conversation. The children, well trained by Winnie, spoke only when addressed directly and used their best manners. Winnie served the food efficiently, saying little. As she cleared the plates after the main course, preparing to bring out the pie, she overheard Mr. Blackwood say, "You've made remarkable progress with the place, Quinn. And your wife has created quite a comfortable home." Winnie froze, her hands full of dirty plates. Through the doorway to the dining room, she saw Forrest's expression shift. Miss Evans isn't my wife, he said evenly. She's my housekeeper. Something in his tone made Winnie's cheeks burn with humiliation. Of course, that was all she could ever be. How foolish she'd been to imagine, even for a moment, that there could be anything more between them. "Ah, I see," Mr. Blackwood responded, a new note in his voice. "Well, she certainly runs an efficient household." Winnie didn't hear Forrest's response. She retreated to the kitchen, set down the plates, and pressed her hands to her hot cheeks. "Stupid, stupid girl," she berated herself. "Remember your place." When she returned with the pie, her face was composed, her voice steady as she offered dessert. If Forrest noticed anything amiss, he gave no sign. After Mr. Blackwood left the following morning, Winnie avoided Forrest as much as possible, keeping herself busy with household tasks. But that evening, as she was putting the younger children to bed, he appeared in the doorway of the nursery. "Might I have a word when you're finished here?" he asked quietly. Winnie nodded, her stomach knotting with apprehension. Had she done something wrong? Was he displeased with her work? After tucking the children in, she found Forrest waiting in the small sitting room off the main parlor. He stood by the window, looking out into the darkness, but turned when she entered. "You've been avoiding me today," he said without preamble. "I've been busy," she replied, not meeting his eyes. "Winnie." Something in his voice made her look up. "What's wrong?" She wanted to say nothing, to retreat behind politeness, but the concern in his eyes undid her. "I overheard Mr. Blackwood yesterday when he mistook me for your wife." Forrest's expression shifted. "Ah, it's fine," she hurried on. "I know my position here." Your position here," he interrupted, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean by that?" "I'm your housekeeper," Winnie said, the words tasting bitter. "Nothing more." Forrest stepped closer, his eyes searching her face. "Is that all you want to be?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning. Winnie's heart pounded painfully against her ribs. "What I want doesn't matter. It matters to me." Another step closer. "Very much, Mr. Quinn." "Forrest," he corrected gently. "Forrest," she conceded, the name feeling intimate on her tongue. "I'm not sure what you're asking." He smiled then, that dimple appearing briefly. "I'm not sure either, to be honest. I just know that when Harold assumed you were my wife, I wished." He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking less sure of himself than she'd ever seen him. "I wished it wasn't a mistake," Winnie's breath caught. "You can't mean that." "Why not?" "Because I'm nobody. A girl who scrubbed saloon floors. I have 4 children depending on me." "I have nothing to offer a man like you." Forrest's expression softened. "You're not nobody, Winnie Evans. You're the strongest, bravest woman I've ever met." He reached out, hesitating before gently taking her hand. "As for having nothing to offer, you've turned this empty house into a home. You've brought laughter and warmth back to a place that was dead." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, sending shivers up her arm. "I don't know exactly what's happening between us," he continued. "I just know I want to find out, if you're willing." Winnie stared at him, scarcely able to believe what she was hearing. "The children are part of the package," he finished for her. "A package I've grown quite fond of, if you hadn't noticed," and she had noticed. She'd seen how patient he was with Tommy's endless questions, how he taught James with respect rather than condescension, how he always had a kind word for Emma and a smile for little Lily. "I don't expect anything," Forrest added quickly. "Just permission to court you properly. To see if what I'm feeling, what I hope you might be feeling too, could grow into something more." Winnie's heart felt too big for her chest. "Yes," she whispered. "I'd like that." His smile then was like sunrise. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned in and pressed his lips gently to hers in a kiss that felt like a promise. As fall deepened toward winter, Forrest courted Winnie with a gentle persistence that melted her remaining reservations. He brought her wildflowers gathered on his rides, left books he thought she might enjoy on her nightstand, and took her for sunset walks around the property. Their conversations ranging from ranch matters to childhood memories to dreams for the future. The children watched this developing romance with varying reactions. James was initially suspicious, questioning Forrest's intentions one evening with all the gravity of a protective father. Forrest answered him honestly, man to man, and something in his response satisfied James, who thereafter regarded the relationship with cautious approval. Emma was delighted, having developed a case of hero worship for the handsome rancher who treated her sister with such obvious admiration. Tommy and Lily, too young to fully understand romance, were simply pleased that Forrest spent even more time with them, teaching them to ride gentle ponies and telling stories by the fire in the evenings. By Christmas, Winnie could no longer deny that she had fallen deeply in love with Forrest Quinn. The feeling terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. He was everything she'd never dared to hope for, kind, honorable, and somehow, inexplicably, as in love with her as she was with him. On Christmas Eve, after the children had hung their stockings with excitement and finally gone to bed, Forrest led Winnie to the parlor where a small fire burned in the fireplace. The room was decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons, a modest tree in the corner adorned with paper ornaments the children had made. "I have something for you," Forrest said, reaching into his pocket. "I was going to wait until morning, but I find I can't." He withdrew a small velvet box and Winnie's heart began to race. When he dropped to one knee before her, she covered her mouth with her hands, tears springing to her eyes. "Winifred Evans," Forrest said, his voice husky with emotion. "I know we haven't known each other long, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You are the woman I want to build a future with, you and those 4 remarkable children." He opened the box to reveal a delicate ring with a small diamond flanked by sapphires. "Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Through her tears, Winnie managed to whisper, "Yes." Forrest slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Winnie Evans, and I love you, Forrest Quinn." The words felt like freedom. They were married on New Year's Day, 1886, in a small ceremony at the ranch. The justice of the peace from Apache Junction officiated, and their only guests were the ranch hands and a few neighbors. Emma served as Winnie's maid of honor, while James stood proudly as Forrest's best man. Winnie wore a simple blue dress Forrest had ordered from Phoenix, with her mother's locket around her neck. When she walked into the parlor where the ceremony would take place, Forrest's face lit up with such joy that any lingering doubts she might have harbored melted away. The vows were brief but heartfelt. When the justice pronounced them husband and wife, Forrest pulled Winnie into a kiss that made the ranch hands whoop and the children giggle. "Mrs. Quinn," he murmured against her lips when they parted. "Mr. Quinn," she returned, hardly able to believe this man, this wonderful, kind, handsome man, was now her husband. The celebration afterward was simple but joyous. They ate the wedding cake Winnie and Emma had baked, drank sparkling cider, and danced to music played by one of the ranch hands on a harmonica. As evening fell, the children, exhausted from excitement, were put to bed. Winnie, suddenly nervous about what came next, stood in the bedroom, now their bedroom, waiting for Forrest. When he entered, he seemed to sense her anxiety. Instead of rushing toward intimacy, he took her hands in his. "We have all the time in the world, Winnie. Nothing needs to happen tonight if you're not ready." His consideration only made her love him more. "I am ready," she said softly. "Just nervous." "So am I," he admitted with a small laugh. "I want so much for you to be happy in every way." "I already am," and it was true. Whatever happened next between them, she knew it would be born of love and respect. Forrest kissed her then, slowly and deeply, and gradually her nervousness gave way to desire. His hands were gentle as he helped her out of her wedding dress, his eyes adoring as he beheld her. When they came together as husband and wife, it was with tenderness that brought tears to Winnie's eyes. Afterward, lying in his arms, she felt a sense of completeness she'd never known before. "I love you," Forrest whispered into the darkness. "I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret saying yes to me." Winnie snuggled closer to his warmth. "I could never regret it, Not for a single moment. Spring came to the ranch, bringing new life and new beginnings. The cattle herd had grown, and the ranch was beginning to show a profit. Forrest had hired several more hands, and there was talk of building a larger barn come summer. The children flourished under the dual care of Winnie and Forrest. James, now 13, shadowed Forrest constantly, learning everything he could about ranching. Emma had discovered a talent for working with horses and spent hours in the stables. Tommy proved to have a knack for numbers, helping Forrest with the ranch books. While Lily charmed everyone with her sunny disposition and growing vocabulary, Winnie, to her amazement, found herself expecting a child of their own in late summer. When she told Forrest, his joy was boundless. He lifted her off her feet and spun her around, then set her down carefully, suddenly concerned he might have hurt her. "I'm not made of glass," she laughed, touched by his protectiveness. "You're carrying precious cargo," he said, placing a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "Our child." The way he said "our" made her heart swell. There had never been any question that he considered James, Emma, Tommy, and Lily his own, but this new baby would be a physical manifestation of their love, a blending of them both. The children's reactions to the news varied. James and Emma, old enough to understand fully, were delighted. Tommy had questions about where babies came from that left Forrest stammering and Winnie hiding her laughter. Lily was simply excited about having a baby to play with, like one of her dolls. As Winnie's body changed with the growing life inside her, Forrest's attentiveness increased. He insisted she rest more, hired a girl from town to help with the heavier housework, and would often massage her aching back in the evenings. One night, as they lay in bed, Forrest's hand resting protectively over the swell of her belly, Winnie reflected on how drastically her life had changed in less than a year. "What are you thinking about?" Forrest asked, propping himself up on one elbow to look at her face in the moonlight. "How lucky I am," she answered honestly. "Last year at this time I was scrubbing floors at the Henderson saloon, wondering how I'd feed the children that week. And now you're the mistress of a prosperous ranch, married to a man who adores you with a baby on the way," Forrest finished for her, his hand caressing her stomach gently. "It doesn't seem real sometimes," she admitted. "It's real," he assured her, leaning down to kiss her softly. "Every bit of it." The baby kicked then, a strong movement against Forrest's palm, his face lit up with wonder. "Hello there, little one," he murmured against Winnie's belly. "Your mama and I can't wait to meet you." Tears filled Winnie's eyes at the tenderness in his voice. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew they would face them together, their family bound by love and resilience. On a sweltering August day after hours of labor, Winnie gave birth to a son they named William Forrest Quinn. He had his father's blue eyes and a tuft of dark hair that Forrest insisted came from Winnie, though her own was a lighter brown. "He's perfect," Forrest whispered, cradling his newborn son with a mixture of awe and terror. "Absolutely perfect." The other children crowded around, eager to meet their new brother. James, serious as always, studied the baby's face intently. "He looks like you, Forrest." "Poor kid," Forrest joked, but his eyes shone with pride. Emma touched the baby's tiny fingers with gentle reverence. "He's so small." "You were that small once," Winnie told her, exhausted but radiant with happiness. "Can I hold him?" Tommy asked eagerly. "When you're sitting down," Forrest said, and very carefully. Lily peered at the baby with curious eyes. "When will he be big enough to play with me?" "Not for a while yet, sweetheart," Winnie explained. "But you can talk to him and sing to him. He'll like that." As she watched her family, all of them gathered around the newest addition, Winnie felt a profound sense of gratitude. This was more than she'd ever dared to dream of when she was scrubbing those saloon floors, desperately trying to keep her siblings fed and sheltered. Life on the ranch settled into a new rhythm with baby William at its center. The older children doted on their little brother, each in their own way. James was protective, Emma nurturing, Tommy entertaining, and Lily a constant companion, chattering to the baby whether he was awake or asleep. Forrest proved to be an attentive father, often carrying William in a sling across his chest as he went about his lighter ranch duties. The sight of her husband, tall and strong with their tiny son nestled against him, never failed to make Winnie's heart swell with love. As autumn approached, bringing cooler days and golden light across the land, the ranch hosted its first harvest festival. Neighbors from miles around gathered to celebrate the successful season, with dancing, feasting, and competitions of strength and skill. Winnie, William in her arms, watched as Forrest demonstrated rope tricks to a circle of admiring children, including their own. His easy laughter carried across the yard, and when he glanced up and caught her watching, his smile warmed her to her toes. Later, as twilight descended and lanterns were lit around the yard, Forrest found her sitting on the porch, the baby asleep in her lap. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Quinn?" he asked, extending his hand with a formal bow that made her laugh. "The baby," she began, "is sound asleep and can be laid in his basket for a few minutes," Forrest finished for her. "Come on, Winnie, dance with your husband." She couldn't resist him. After carefully placing William in the basket they kept on the porch, she took Forrest's hand and allowed him to lead her to the cleared area where other couples were already dancing to the lively fiddle music. In his arms, spinning under the stars, Winnie felt a happiness so complete it almost frightened her. Could any heart contain so much joy without bursting? As if reading her thoughts, Forrest pulled her closer. "Happy," he murmured against her hair. "More than I knew was possible," she answered truthfully, his arms tightened around her. "Me too, Winnie, me too." The years passed, marked by seasons of growth and change. The ranch prospered under Forrest's management, becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. The children grew, each developing their own strengths and interests. James, at 16, was nearly as tall as Forrest and showed a natural aptitude for ranching. He'd recently begun talking about attending the agricultural college in Tucson, an idea Forrest enthusiastically supported. Emma, now 13, had blossomed into a confident young woman with a particular gift for working with horses. She spent hours training the ranch's stock, including a spirited filly Forrest had given her for her birthday. Tommy, at 11, was the scholar of the family, devouring books on every subject and keeping the ranch's accounts with remarkable accuracy for his age. Forrest often joked that Tommy would end up owning the bank in Phoenix someday. 9-year-old Lily remained the sunshine of the household, her cheerful nature and artistic talents bringing beauty to everyday life. She had recently taken up embroidery, creating delicate designs that Winnie proudly displayed throughout the house. William, now 3, was a sturdy, curious boy who followed his father and older siblings everywhere, constantly asking why and how about everything he encountered. He had Forrest's adventurous spirit and Winnie's quiet determination. And there was another Quinn, now Sarah Elizabeth, just 1 year old, with Winnie's brown eyes and a mischievous smile that wrapped everyone around her tiny fingers. On a crisp October day in 1890, Winnie stood on the porch of their home, watching Forrest teaching William to ride his first pony while Sarah played on a blanket at her feet. In the distance, James and several ranch hands drove a herd of cattle toward the winter pastures, while Emma exercised horses in the corral nearby. "Mama," William called, waving frantically. "Look at me, I'm riding. I see you, darling." She called back, smiling at his excitement and Forrest's obvious pride. From inside the house came the sound of Tommy reading aloud to Lily, his voice animated as he brought some adventure story to life for his sister. This was her life now, this beautiful, bustling, occasionally chaotic family on this land that had become so deeply home. Sometimes she still marveled at how it had all come to pass, how a desperate young woman scrubbing saloon floors had found such happiness. Forrest glanced up from adjusting William's stirrups and caught her watching. Even after 5 years of marriage, the smile he sent her way still made her heart skip. He said something to William, then crossed the yard to join her on the porch. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs." "Quinn," he said, slipping an arm around her waist and dropping a kiss on the top of her head. "I was just thinking how fortunate we are," she replied, leaning into his solid warmth. "All of us." Forrest's arm tightened around her. "I'm the fortunate one. Walking into that saloon 5 years ago was the best decision I ever made." "Even though you got more than you bargained for," she teased, gesturing toward their growing family. "6 children is quite a brood." "Best bargain of my life," he said with complete sincerity. His blue eyes, still as bright and kind as the day they'd met, looked deeply into hers. "I love you, Winnie Quinn, more today than yesterday and not as much as tomorrow." She stretched up to kiss him, this man who had changed everything. "And I love you, Forrest Quinn, always and forever." As the sun began its descent behind the distant mountains, casting long shadows across the land they'd built together, Winnie knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. From scrubbing floors, to feed her siblings, to finding love and creating a home where all of them could thrive, it had been a journey she could never have imagined. But standing here now, in the arms of the man she loved, surrounded by their children and the life they'd built together, she wouldn't change a single step along the way.